Hello again. Welcome to another episode of the Uranium Market Minute. Today is Monday, January 10th, and this is episode number 60. My name is Justin Hune. I'm your host. I'm the founder and publisher of the Uranium Insider Pro newsletter, the only investing newsletter that focuses solely on uranium and publishes on a regular monthly basis. Thank you so much for tuning in. Before we get into it, as always, nothing in this video is intended to be investing advice. I'm not your financial advisor. This is not financial advice. Please always do your own due diligence when it comes to investing, and always take responsibility for your own choices. All right, before we get into the daily scoreboard here, I want to remind everyone that this coming Thursday is our January members webinar. If you are a member of Uranium Insider Pro, we hope to see you there. If you can't make it live, there will be a recording up on the website for replay later that day. Be patient with that process for the recording to be posted. It takes multiple hours for that to be downloaded, edited, re-uploaded, and posted. So usually later that day, late afternoon, early evening, we will have the replay posted to the website. If you're not a member and you would like to join, you can click the link below in the description. We'll send you a sample newsletter from the previous month that you can get an idea about the type of content. And to give you some idea about these webinars, they're usually about 2 hours long. We go deep into the sector. We talk about all of our focus list positions, the companies that we recommend within the space, and we typically have a guest. This week, we will also have a guest, a CEO from one of the companies that we own and recommend. And he'll be joining us for probably about 45 minutes, give us a presentation on the company, what they're up to. This particular company is really executing very well. So I'm really looking forward to this week. And of course, we go deep into the sector, and there's so much to talk about right now with everything that's going on in Kazakhstan, with the EU taxonomy, with the expectations of the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust this year, the New York Stock Exchange listing, etc. So much to discuss on Thursday, and we look forward to seeing you there. That said, let's jump right into the daily scoreboard. Spot price of uranium today coming in at 45.75 mid-market, holding up very well. We're not seeing, on the days that we're not seeing volume come into the spot market, the price is staying stable. And of course, as part of the daily scoreboard, we always discuss the flows into the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust, also known as SPUT. They had a huge day on Friday. They bought 1 million pounds on Friday alone. This is a couple days after the record volume day on Wednesday of last week, where they raised $83 million. So they bought 1 million pounds on Friday, 400,000 pounds on Wednesday. That means the first week of the year, SPUT purchased 1.4 million pounds. This is a huge start to the year, and we do expect that they will likely continue on this pace. Maybe not quite that much, but considering how heavy-handed they can come in on the days when they can raise money like they did on last Wednesday, that really gives them incredible purchasing power. So now they're sitting on 69.6 million in cash. They closed on Friday at a 2% premium to NAV. It sold off a bit this morning, but the stock is recovering. They're likely at a premium to NAV currently. So most likely they're raising some more cash in the open market via their ATM right now. So they have raised since August of last year, 1.1 billion in their ATM, and they have purchased 24.4 million pounds of uranium. We've mentioned on a previous couple of episodes, the supply and demand situation going forward this year, how it stands at a really huge, we're looking at about a 50 million supply deficit, even including secondary supply. And that is not counting the financial impact in the sector. So we could have a absolutely massive supply deficit for the year 2022, and it's getting off to a solid start with SPUT's buying last week. So we'll see what they accomplish this week, continuing at that premium to their net asset value. As I've mentioned many times, they have 3.5 billion allocated for this ATM. So they have a long ways to go once they run through this current 1.5 billion. Turning to the sector equity ETFs, on Friday, URA issued 1.75 million shares. They now sit at an all-time high of 43.6 million shares outstanding. That share issuance led to 29 million in mandated buying. URNM reported no change in outstanding shares. So the combined AUMs for the two ETFs is back over 2 billion, coming in at 2.04 billion, an increase of 71.4 million on Friday alone. Now the two ATMs, the AUMs of the two ETFs is still 500 million lower than the peak in November. And that was 7 weeks ago. So we have a little ways to go to get back to that previous high, but the sector definitely seems like it's stabilizing here, ready for the next leg up. Let's go ahead and take a look at the charts. Starting off with URA, it looks like we're having some more sideways consolidation here above the rising 200-day moving average. The indicators are stabilizing and slowly rising as they move sideways. Overall, the sector looks healthy, especially if we zoom out. We had that big pullback from November. We had URA, we had a high of just over $31 in November, and it bottomed out at just over $22. We had about a 32% decline since the peak in November, and now we've got sideways chop in this channel for about 4 or 5 weeks here, and it looks like the sector is trying to find a bottom here. The rising 200-day moving average acts as pretty solid support. We had an undercut low here back in August, and it recovered sharply. We dipped down below there briefly on a few days over the past few weeks, but overall it's holding up quite well. Sprott Physical Uranium Trust is looking extremely strong. Multiple hammers the last 3 days. The dips are being bought consistently. And of course, we had this record volume last Wednesday. So this is definitely trading at a premium to NAV here. It's down on the day of about 2%, but the spot price is stable. So we're right around NAV, probably maybe at a slight premium, but it's nice to see that the dips are being bought here, and the dips are being bought across the sector. Sector-wide, we're seeing multiple hammer candles printed on the day. And of course, we are facing a relatively weak broad market, and when the spot price isn't moving and when the sentiment is, let's say, mediocre, the sector doesn't really run. So even though some of these puppies want to run here, we have a weak broad market today. And that definitely has an influence when the sentiment isn't strong, when the flows into spot or the movement in the spot price aren't strong, and the broad market can weigh on this sector. I'm going to talk about that a bit in the mailbag section, which let's just go to that immediately. But actually, before we do, I'm going to talk about Kazakhstan briefly. So I'll give you a quick update on what we're hearing. It seems that things are stabilizing a bit there. Of course, that comes under the heavy hand of Russian soldiers, Belarusian soldiers. And we know that we heard last week the president had issued shoot to kill orders essentially to the protesters. And we were hearing that over 150 people lost their lives in the past week in Kazakhstan in these protests. So definitely heavy news in terms of the lives lost during this conflict. As far as our investments are concerned, that always takes a secondary importance when we're people first, right? We're citizens first, and we always want to be concerned about each other and people that are going through these difficult times. And with that said, what it looks like is that the Russian army is stabilizing the country. What that means for Kazatomprom specifically, it's still very difficult to tell. We're hearing multiple messaging that the Russian army or the Russian Air Force, I believe it was, is guarding Kazatomprom. That's obviously a very important asset to Russia and to Kazakhstan, of course. But we are hearing messaging from Kazatomprom that while they do have protections in place from the Russian army, they do expect to still see some sort of delays, some sort of interruptions in their critical supplies. So we don't know what that's going to look like. I believe that what that probably means in terms of critical supplies is most likely sulfuric acid, which is the lixiviant that they run through their ISR wells for their production. We could see some minor interruptions. I'm honestly not at this point expecting big interruptions in their production. It's the heart of winter. They're not typically doing a lot of well field development anyways during this time of the year, but the wells that are in place do need that consistent supply of sulfuric acid in order to continue production. So if that gets interrupted, it could slow things down for them, but we just don't know yet. That's all speculation. So there's just not a lot of information coming out. Either way, it does seem like Russia is in place in Kazakhstan across multiple cities, across multiple important elements of the country, the airports, the government buildings, and Kazatomprom. Interestingly enough, it doesn't seem like they are guarding the oil and gas production facilities. That's a huge export, a huge industry for Kazakhstan, but Russia has their own huge oil and gas industry. However, Russia does not have a huge uranium industry. So Kazakhstan is a very, very important asset for Russia, and that could have something to do with their presence there. Again, this is all just speculation, but based on the news that's coming in, it could be possible. So it seems like the market is also just generally, the uranium market is reacting to this kind of overly exuberant expectation that production would be interrupted and the spot price would go to the moon. Of course, we never expected that. And usually what happens when that type of speculation money comes in and the stocks fly and then they sell off really quickly, it takes a minute for the sentiment to reset. It's like, oh yeah, we're still in a bull market. We still have a huge, potentially 75, 85 plus million pound deficit if you include the financials this year alone. You still have Sprott taking over URNM next month. You still have Sprott already in the application phase of the New York Stock Exchange listing, or within the next week or two. That should happen late Q2, early Q3. Major developments happening in the space and a huge supply deficit. So the overall thesis hasn't changed, but this other piece of news came in out of the blue, got people all hyped up, and now it seems like that's stabilizing, and now we're waiting for more information to find out more. So prayers go out to the people in Kazakhstan and the families of those who have family members who've lost their lives in the protests. Just absolutely terrible. And I hope that the situation can stabilize further in a peaceful manner. And the people of Kazakhstan hopefully will not live under, a heavy authoritarian regime. That's my hope. So we'll have to see what happens. And we'll continue to update you as information comes in. So let's take a look at the mailbag. I had a question come in about correlation to the broad market. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. I pulled up this chart of URA compared with the S&P. And of course, if you go reverse correlated, the uranium sector had a long bear market. From essentially 2011 to about 2016 was the bottom of the commodity. 2020 really was the bottom for the equities. So that's why I just zoomed out slightly past March of 2020, where you can see the bottom in the S&P, the bottom in URA are pretty close here, and how the uranium sector has vastly outperformed the S&P. However, during times of weak sentiment, let's say, in the uranium space, during times of consolidation or selling off in uranium, or at least times where you have you don't have increasing volumes, strong uptrends, strong moves in the spot market, a weak broad market will influence this market. So especially on a day-to-day basis, when you zoom out and you look at the broad picture, you can clearly see that a bull market in a commodity space, in a resource space, can vastly outperform even a sharply growing broad market. And of course, look at this chart with these two, the S&P and the URA, relative to each other. And then let's take a look at the S&P zoomed out, and the steepness of this chart over a similar period of time. It's unbelievably steep. And now when you compare that with URA, just see how steeply URA had to move in order to outperform this type of chart. But of course, we have days like today where we had a strong gap down, but nice looking recovery on the day. Still, it's down 63 handles. So not a strong day for the broad markets. And whenever we have weak broad markets, it does affect the uranium sector, especially when they're not flying in the spot market and the equities aren't flying on big volumes. So until we have a reversal in the S&P and or a reversal in the underlying uranium holdings of the ETFs themselves, and of course the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust with more big volumes, more buying, then we probably will chop sideways for another moment or two here. So nothing really concerning. And considering that the situation in Kazakhstan seems to be stabilizing, at least for the short term, we can kind of remove that short-term speculation and focus more on the overall fundamentals for the sector and the mid and long-term outlook for the sector. And that's what we always do. But of course, the short-term matters, but we focus on the long-term overall in our thesis. And so that's what we're seeing out there today. And we will keep you all posted. Like I said, the members webinar coming up this Thursday. Hope to see you there. And if you do want to see a sample newsletter, click the link in the description below, and we will send you out a sample from the previous month. And get in touch if you have any questions. Until tomorrow, have a great evening, and we'll see you then. Cheers.